everyone to take your seats. My name is Sean Chan. The Member of Parliament for Scarborough North. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this year's Budget 2022 Media Dim Sum. Before we begin, I'd like to first acknowledge that we are here on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabeg, Seneca, Chippewa, the current treaty holders, Mississaugas of the Credit peoples. We share the responsibility to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust, and we remain committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. Now I'd like to introduce my good friend and colleague, the Honorable Mary Ng, our Minister of International Trade, Export Promotion, Small Business, and Economic Development. She's really busy, as you can tell. It's a long title. The Honorable Mary Ng.
Thanks so much. I'm not going to stand up, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Thank you, and thank you so much to the member of the press to be here today. But before I get going, I think what we're going to try to do is have colleagues do a bit of an introduction. It is just so important that we have that we are able to talk to members of the press. You do such important work to communicate to Asian Canadians, to Chinese Canadians, and it's really terrific that at this particular point we're able to give you a bit of an update since the last time we spoke. But before we do that, we have along on both my right and left, and I think Sean will take us through, but an extraordinary group of colleagues, members of Parliament, parliamentary secretary who are doing enormous work for our community, and I'd love for them to just say a few words. Sean, back to you.
All right, so you know what? I might as well stay seated now.
Sorry. You're too tall.
To Minister Ng's right is Parliamentary Secretary Rob Oliphant. Rob.
I'll stay seated as well. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Sean. And thanks mostly to the members of the media who are here today to share your stories. That's what you are. You're storytellers. And you make sure that Canadians hear the stories that are important to them. And you help shape them and make sure that every cultural community is engaged, particularly the Asian and Chinese communities. I'm Rob Oliphant. I'm a member of Parliament for Don Valley West, which goes from the 401 down to Parkwood Park and from Leslie over to Yonge Street. It is a very multicultural, diverse riding. I also work as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, so I follow files that many of you like to cover internationally, and I'm happy to help with any information you might need.
Thank you. And to Parliamentary Secretary Oliphant's right is Han Dong, MP for Don Valley North.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Han Dong. I'm the Member of Parliament for Don Valley North. 大家早上好，我是侯爷Han Dong。今天呢，很高兴啊，又和媒体的众位朋友相聚一堂。我记得上一次前不久吧，我们做 media roundtable 也是伍部长和我们一起做这个 media roundtable 的时候，就说以后我们会经常做，这是我们一个很好的途径呢。是让我们的华人社区了解更多的关于联邦的各项政策，也是一个很好的机会呢。有这个夏天啊休会的时候呢，和大家在政策上面呢有这么一个互动然后让我们9月份回去的时候，议会里面呢有更多实质性的更多华人社区关心的事情来加以讨论。谢谢大家。
Right, thank you, Han. And to Han's right is Jane Yip, MP for Scarborough Aging Court. Jane.
Good morning, I'm Jane Yip, the Member of Parliament for Scarborough Aging Court, and I'm delighted to see all of you here. And thank you to Minister Ng and Sean and also hosting today. It's been a while, and I think these meetings with Chinese media is very important, so that we can keep up to date, know what the government is doing, know how the community feels as well. So it's important that we continue to do these things. Thank you for coming.
Thank Eugene, and to my left is Lee Taylor Roy, MP for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, great to see everyone. I feel like I know many of you now, made some friends, which is wonderful. Really appreciate your coming out. And I always feel badly after, especially hearing Hans speak so fluently in Chinese, to not be able to say anything. But I do have my trusted advisor from my office, Minnie Wang, here with me, who helps me, and has been trying desperately to teach me a few things, and I'm a terrible student, so forgive me. But really appreciate the role that you play in our democracy, the role that you play in government, actually, because without people knowing what's going on with us in Ottawa, what we do is just an asylum. So the work you do is so important, and I really feel like you're part of the process. So thank you for being here. Thank you for what we do, and communicating to the communities that you serve.
Thank you, Lee. And last but not least, to the left of Lee is Salma Zahid, Member of Parliament for Scarborough Centre.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Salma Zahid. I'm a Member of Parliament for Scarborough Centre. My riding is from Eglinton to 401 and Victoria Park to Bellamy. And I've been serving this community since 2015. Thanks for joining us today as we talk about the impact of Budget 2022, how it is helping the class grow their lives and be able to put food on the table. It has been difficult times, but you play an important role because I have seen that so many households rely on the ethnic newspapers I give home for the news, what's happening. So thank you for all the work that you do and bringing all the important policies of the government to every door. So a lot of people are relying on you, and it would be great to talk about some of the policies which impact the families of Scarborough. Thank you.
Thank you, Salma. And now I pass it back to Minister Ng to provide her remarks.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, colleagues, for the introduction. And you can see from my colleagues just how represented our communities are, and I love doing these roundtables because it really, what you're seeing here is a team, and a team that is working hard for Canadians. It's terrific to see so many familiar faces, and I might say familiar faces in person. It has also been a very long time since we've been able to see one another in person, and that is really, really terrific. And you've heard from all of us the many areas that we all represent, and it's about carrying our constituents' voices to Ottawa and getting things done for people. What you also heard from my colleagues is the importance of the media and why it's so important for us to be engaging with all of you. And I think what you've seen from us is that we do this regularly, creating an opportunity to speak to you and through you to the very dynamic citizens, Canadians, and people who read your newspaper, who participate in your blogs, and who are hearing what is going on in Canadian life, but certainly by the government to Canadians. And I think back about how important it was during the pandemic and the important role that the media played in providing COVID-19 updates with breaking news, connecting with each other, connecting with our communities, and now as we are on this road to build back our economy and our communities, it is equally important because it is the work that we are doing, but it is also a place where you, as the media, are able to ask us questions about the kind of work that we're doing and to provide you as much information as we possibly can for you to take back to Canadians. And it has been about a year since we were elected with a clear mandate to support Canadians through these unprecedented times, to generate jobs and economic growth, and to create more opportunities for Canadian families and for their children to succeed. And this is exactly what our government has been doing, delivering through our latest budget. Today I want to give you some of the highlights. I know my colleagues are also very happy to share those as well. What we've accomplished and what the road ahead looks like. First and foremost, we're making life more affordable for Canadians. Like everyone else and all of us here at the front of the room, we to experience and see the prices at the gas stations or the prices on the shelves here, of course, locally at TNT, but there's many other wonderful stores. The cost of childcare. But here is the good news. Our government has taken a comprehensive approach and a plan to tackle inflation and to support Canadians and families. Here's what we've done in this last budget. We are enhancing the Canada Workers Benefit, putting up to $2,400 into the pockets of low-income families. This is really important for many Canadians, Chinese Canadians, Asian Canadians in our communities. We've increased the old age security for seniors 75 and over by 10%, and we're going to provide an additional $765 to more than 3 million seniors. We're cutting childcare by an average of 50% by the end of this year across the country. And here in the Greater Toronto area, we're talking about savings of nearly $19,000 a year with the $10 a day childcare plan. And if you think about just those three things that were in the budget, and there are other measures, this means extra money into the pockets of Canadians and families so that they can have a little bit more affordability to deal with the groceries and to deal with the bills that they've got to pay with. We've laid out a plan in our budget where we're working to double the number of new homes that we build over the next 10 years. We have wonderful families in our communities and incredible citizens who call Canada home and this area, the Greater Toronto area, home. Housing affordability is important, and this is historic investments that the federal government, for the very first time in decades, are making to create housing, more affordability for families. The other thing that we're doing, a great focus has been placed on this, you'll remember because you will have heard from all of us, is about children and communities being safe. 2 years ago, the Prime Minister, under Prime Minister Trudeau, banned assault-style firearms in Canada. And just last week, you have seen our new ban on the imports of handguns come into effect. This is significant investments made by the federal government to fight for safety. But in this community, the other fight is also to make sure that we really are the inclusive and diverse community that we are. We have seen an alarming rise in anti-Asian racism, and I just want to assure everyone, my colleagues and I, and everyone across government are working steadfastly to make sure that we are fighting against anti-Asian racism and discrimination in all of its forms. And then third, we are tackling the economy, to grow the economy, creating good jobs for businesses, good jobs created by those businesses, but really good job for Canadian workers. And I want to thank the hard work of Canadians, and because the last 2 years have been really tough. And I think about the businesses just like the one that's here, not very different from a business that I grew up with myself, and understanding just how difficult it was for Canadians, and making sure we did everything possible not to scar Canadians nor businesses so that they had the supports that they received in COVID, so that we can get on that road to economic recovery. 8 out of $10 for the pandemic was provided by the federal government. And thanks to the hard work and the historic investments that our government has been making, we've already recovered more than 100% of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic. And now we have record unemployment. I know that it means that for workers this is terrific because it is about finding that great job, but for employers, having that wealth of talent across the country is something we're working very hard at. And at the heart of this recovery, of course, are so many of the small businesses that are across the country from coast to coast to coast. I think 2 weeks ago I was out on the East Coast in Halifax, and just last week I was in British Columbia, and this week we're crisscrossing Ontario as Windsor yesterday, and just seeing the small businesses and when we say they are the backbone of Canada's economy, they really are. They are the drivers of our economic growth, and they play such an important contribution to our neighborhoods and our communities. And here in the budget, we have put some supports into place to help businesses do better. We have cut taxes for small businesses because we are really eyeing. I mean, if during the pandemic we have seen 100% recovery of all the jobs that we have lost, then what we're seeing is those small businesses grow. And we have some of the lowest tax rates for small businesses, and for those that are growing, we want them to stay competitive, and we want to incentivize their growth. And that is where we've cut taxes for those small businesses to help them with that growth. For women entrepreneurs and for young entrepreneurs, indigenous entrepreneurs, racialized entrepreneurs, making sure that the barriers that they have faced, we are tackling them one by one to make sure that everyone gets a part in our economy. And so far, if I look at some of our data, those investments are working because we are seeing new businesses created. Those that are small are being helped to increase the size of their businesses. And one of the things that we saw around resiliency during the pandemic was the adoption of digital. How many times have we seen that we can't go into places like this, but we could do curbside pickup, or that we could do customer service in a way through our iPhones or through our laptops. It just really did change the way that businesses were doing business and how people interacted with their communities. And here we've invested $4 billion to help businesses increase their digital adoption. So really, really important. But let me be frank, I mean, Canada is a very big country. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Asia for the ASEAN ministers meeting, and I was in Cambodia, and there I remember speaking to my colleagues, and I said, I think it might have been Malaysia. I said, you know, you can fit 50 Malaysias in Canada in geography, but in size, we're about the size of California in people and population. So what does this mean? It means that we are increasing our footprint around the world. Already, Canada has some terrific access to markets around the world, and we're doing more. Whether it is in the Indo-Pacific or it is in the United Kingdom, and just expanding that footprint. I will be, if I think about Asia, in the last just few months, I've been in Singapore, in Thailand, in Cambodia, in India. I will be in the Philippines in the next few weeks, and I'll be back in Asia in the next few weeks for G20 and for ASEAN. And this is work that we all do. I don't do this work without my terrific colleagues here across to my left and to my right. At the very end of the day, the work that our government is doing is work to improve the lives of Canadians, to increase and help affordability, and to make sure that middle-class Canadians and those working hard to join the middle class are supported, and that you often hear us say that our government has your back. We do. And we're going to keep doing this work, and those are a few of the highlights on Budget 2022. I'm sure colleagues from the media will have other questions, which we are very happy to answer. With that, thank you very much. And I will pass it back to Sean.
Thank you, Minister, for those remarks and for the update on what our government is doing. I will now open the floor to questions from the media. So I would ask all members of the media, when you are posing your question, please introduce yourself and the organization you represent, and please limit your question to 1 minute. Once we have collected the questions, we will then proceed to provide responses with the panel of MPs here in the front. So, yes, Joseph.
According to today's Toronto Star, it says that interest rate rise, Canada's banks are setting aside millions to lure away from consumer loan defaults. That means many people, they can afford the interest rate hikes, the rise, so they cannot pay their loan, and they may go under or any government remedy for this kind of situation.
Okay, thank you. And Joseph, can you just introduce yourself, please?
I'm Joseph Lau from Toronto TV.
Thank you.
We have been here for 20 years.
Yes, happy 20th anniversary. All right, so I will get to the responses. Do we have any other questions? Please.
Hi, Sean. I'm Ray Chen from Singapore Daily. And actually, the CFIB said that 80% of the small business is still suffering from the pandemic, but the government support is ended today. So is there any program to extend the help for others so that they can really get back into the
Thank you, Ray. All right, do we have any other questions? Yes.
My name is Flora. I'm from Business News North America. So I have two questions. The first one is, you just mentioned that we are bearing the inflation, the high inflation rate. So is there any further measures other than that one, these are listed in the budget that the government would like to introduce to ease people's pain? And the second one is, we just saw that President Biden announced the student loan relief yesterday. So is there any similar measures that we can expect in Canada? Thank you.
Thank you, Flora. And yes, please go ahead.
My name is Helen from Fairchild Television. You did mention that you have already recovered more than 100% of the jobs lost in the pandemic. But as we all know, the unemployment rate is still very high. Is there an information on why that is and how you're going to tackle it? And what reasoning and driving force that will address?
Okay, thank you. And what's your name again? Helen. Thank you, Helen. All right. I'm not as fast writing as you media folks. I'm trying my best. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Carrie from the Legend Media.
From
the Legend Media.
Legends, yes, thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, I got a question because I know because of COVID, there are so many new businesses, small businesses, and it's very painful for them to start up. How our government to help them to start up the new business again?
Okay, thank you.
Why don't we do 5? Because otherwise we might forget.
A good idea. I think I can read my quick writing. So we first have a question from Joseph from Toronto TV regarding interest rates going up, and many people cannot afford, and this stemming out of a recent Toronto Star article. So
why don't I kind of attempt to answer them, because they sort of, they're sort of, I think there's a question around the rise of interest rates or inflation and how to deal with overall the cost of living. I think Helen at Fairchild said it's the highest unemployment rate. It's actually the lowest unemployment rate. So we've recovered 116% of all the jobs that were lost, and in fact, it is the lowest unemployment rate right now in Canada. The measures that were in the budget that I shared is really going at the heart of giving more Canadians just more money in their pocket. What does this mean? When you are a low-wage worker, having a Canada Workers Benefit will help you with up to $2,400 extra, which means additional money for you to deal with the cost of living. The Canada Child Benefit, which I didn't talk about, this was introduced at the it was one of the very first things that we introduced as government, and here we've seen for the very first time, just a few weeks ago, child poverty has been decreased in our country. Child poverty, and up until now you have seen a flat line, but child poverty in this country decreased because of the Canada Child Benefit, which is indexed to inflation, which means more money that goes into the pockets of regular families to help them make ends meet. Childcare. There are so many families that are here. Imagine that today you pay, I'll just make up a number because it's more than this, but imagine you pay $100. Well, if you're paying $50, then that additional $50 goes into your pocket, and you are able to use that to tackle the, the cost of living day to day. And these are the range of measures. I mean, so inflation is a worldwide issue. It isn't just Canada. The illegal war that Russia has perpetrated on Ukraine has raised prices in energy. It has raised the prices in terms of people's cost of living. We, of course, are working on this along with with others along the world. So inflation is not exclusive to Canada, but we have a plan to tackle inflation. On the question around businesses, so small businesses, so maybe I'll take that one and then open it up and to colleagues. But on small businesses, I think back to the early days of the pandemic, and when businesses were closed. And I applaud especially our smallest of businesses, because they had to close their doors to keep everyone safe. Canadians stayed home to keep everybody safe. And our government was absolutely focused, laser focused on making sure that Canadians and their well-being and their health was top of mind. So you saw benefits like CERB, you saw for businesses the support for loans to pay the bills, to pay the rent, to keep your staff on staff with a 75% wage subsidy. What we are seeing coming out, it's precisely, I believe, why our jobs have been recovered. It is precisely why we've had the recovery as quick as we have, because people and our businesses have not been scarred because of the enormous investment that we as a government, but we as Canadians made on each other. So our recovery is, has been fast, and it has also been a solid recovery in terms of businesses. The supports that are in place, there are some sectors that are harder hit than others. I remember having a wonderful conversation with a business here locally in Markham, where they said, well, I see these wonderful government programs and supports, and how might I be eligible? And I said, so how are you doing? How have you done during the pandemic? Because business has been better than ever. In fact, I was busier. I said, well, those supports aren't for you. And the reason they're not for you is because they are there for those who are truly the hardest hit. So we know that there are still some businesses. I think about hospitality. I think about arts and culture and the shows. They're just starting to come back. All of us have been starting to attend them. They've been hardest hit, and we have particularly paid attention to those that are the hardest hit. But to others, it's about making them more competitive. You heard me talk about the digital adoption program. I am seeing businesses all over the place going digital and taking advantage of this program so that they can be more resilient and in fact growing. And speaking to young people, we have done an enormous amount of work and support to make sure that young people, particularly around the loans and forgivability and so forth, are supported through the pandemic. And speaking of the Canada Digital Adoption Program, the reason it's a $4 billion program is because hardwired into this design is that we are going to give opportunity to tens of thousands of young people to give them the experience of helping businesses go digital. And I hope in that experience, as businesses grow, some of those young people are actually also going to be the future employees of those very companies. So so I hope what you're hearing is sort of a whole of government, many of us working together, but really focused on affordability for Canadians. And there I'll stop, and my colleagues may want to add in.
I have here Han.
Sure, I just want to quickly address Joseph's question. First of all, interest rate is not set by the federal government. It's set by the Bank of Canada, and we don't interfere with their operation. And they do have a mandate to make sure the inflation is within control. Second thing, you talked about the article mentioning some people that there will be a lot of people under a lot of pressure. But that's what stress test is there for. The stress test is designed to 2%, usually more than the prime rate. And I think although interest rate has increased sharply, but it's still within that limit, and that's what stress test is designed for. The market is reacting to the interest rate, and that's normal, including some people that they may want to get rid of whatever on their hand because they fear that it will fall further. I tell you what the government's not going to do is to get involved or interfere with the housing market, but what we are going to do, or we have been doing, is increasing the supply, the affordable housing supply in the market. And that's what Canadians wanted, and that's what they told us on solution. The other thing the government is doing is we heard from Minister Ng that we're providing support for those that are really vulnerable in our society, whether it's seniors, whether it's newcomers, whether it's parents with young parents. There are various measures in the national budget that shows that this government understands that the inflation is putting a lot of pressure on families, on working families, on seniors, and we're there to support them. But we're not going to interfere with the housing market.
Thank you. Lee?
Yes, I just wanted to add too on the issue of the interest rates. As Hans said, it's the Bank of Canada who sets those. But the government can control some fiscal policy. And I think everyone noticed that in the last budget, the spending came down dramatically from during the COVID period. And part of the reason we did that was to try and combat inflationary pressure, because government spending also can create inflationary pressure. So the cessation of some of the programs that's happening was to balance that. We knew that we couldn't keep spending at the rate we had been spending, or inflation would be worse. So I think, although we don't control the monetary policy, we do have some say in fiscal, and I think Christian Freeland in the last budget was very aware of that, and it was a much more restrained budget, and with an eye to bringing down the deficit and controlling inflation. The other thing I'd just like to add is I serve on both the Environment and the Agriculture Committee, and in both those sectors, the government has been investing in businesses and helping to make the transition to the green economy. And I think that's very important because I believe that this is going to help our economy long term. Canada has what it takes to be a leader in green industry. And we've just seen the historic meeting between Germany and Canada over green hydrogen. We have so many opportunities like that. And when we take advantage of those things, it helps everyone. It helps all the small businesses because more money in the pockets of Canadians mean people can go and spend. So it's an important thing. The last thing I just want to add to what Minister Ng said was when it comes to the programs we have for those who need it most, those are all indexed, not just the Canada Child Benefit. So when inflation goes up, people who are receiving the programs, these supports, their payments will be going up as well. And it helps, it's not the answer, but it helps to offset the inflationary pressure as well. So I think our government is working very hard to try and address the concerns of the overall economy and also the needs of those who are most in need.
Rob?
I think Mary and Han and Leah have expressed really the most important things that we wanted to stress today. I just want to add, and it maybe sounds a little bit partisan, but I want to say that the Liberal Party and our Liberal government is a market-driven government. We believe in the power and the importance of business. We believe in the importance of encouraging and stimulating, but also allowing business to be business. That is our goal. At the very same time, what makes us also liberal is that we, as it says, we pick up where the most vulnerable will be hurt by that. And we will constantly do that. We have a global phenomenon with inflation. It is a result of the pandemic. It's a result of the illegal war by Russia and Ukraine. There are supply chain issues. There are food and fertilizer issues. That is a reality. And what we're doing is trying to let the market adjust, making sure that we had two questions, one on interest rates, one on inflation. They're tied. So we're trying to slowly increase, as the government, the Bank of Canada will slowly increase interest rates, at the same time manage government spending as good fiscal managers. There's a myth out there that the Conservatives will say they're good at fiscal management. They're not. We want business to succeed, to thrive, to create jobs. The government hasn't created many jobs. We've helped business create jobs. That's what we've done. At the same time, helping the most vulnerable. When I first got into politics, first elected in 2008, the poverty rate among children in my own riding, especially Thornton Park, was massive. Kids went to school without the right clothes, without a backpack, without breakfast in their tummy. Now, as a result of the Canada Child Benefit and other programs, we have seen poverty alleviated. We're not a perfect government, but we're working with business, with people, bringing them together, and that's what I think has got us through the pandemic and into recovery. We've got a pretty tight financial manager in Christopher Freeland right now as the finance minister. She's making sure we don't overspend. We're keeping the public purse under control so that we have a long term. And we're going to be your government for a long time, so get used to it.
Yes, and so I just wanted to touch upon the vulnerable population of seniors. I'm just so excited to recap on the announcement of the 10% increase of OAS for seniors 75 and up. This will help full pensioners receive up to $800 in their first year. And the first payments will start on July 27th. And this will impact 3.3 million seniors, of which 56% are women. And for for seniors who are concerned about trying to remain at home. We have the at-home initiative that was just announced by Minister Kira. It's $90 million. It is a $90 million initiative spread over 4 years to help seniors stay at home, whether it's like housekeeping, home maintenance, having somebody come over, time, all of that. We're looking at pilot projects.
Thank you, Jean. And Jean is chair of our seniors caucus, and she's been leading a lot of efforts to support our seniors. So I turn over now to Salma.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, I think we are all going through very tough times, and the last 30 months have not been easy. We have seen inflation is a global phenomenon, and because of COVID and the disruptions in people's demand and supply chains, we have come to a level where some people are saying that yes, it has gone beyond what they can do. But I think it was really very important to invest during the COVID. And when I talk to the businesses in my riding, they tell me that because of the government supports, they were able to keep the lights open and keep us going during the darkest days. And because of those investments and those businesses were going, we are able to gain back all the 100% jobs after in our recovery after the COVID. So the Canada Child Benefit and increase in the old age security for the seniors over the age of 75 will really help the most vulnerable families and offset the cost of the inflation as they are indexed to inflation. So when I'm talking to the families, they tell me the stories that how Canada Child Benefit has really made a difference in their lives, and now when coming back to the school year, as kids are going back, they can afford many things which they were not able to afford, and it has really helped the kids to get out of poverty.
Thank you, Salma. And finally, I will simply add myself a few comments. I think, folks, it's very important for Canadians to continue to remember the context under which we are here. We emerged as a country from a global health crisis that affected people all around this planet. And when we think about what we did as a government to keep Canadians safe, but to keep them solvent at the same time, to ensure businesses were able to continue to support our most vulnerable in society, we did our very best to ensure that Canada would rebound out of this crisis. And we have, as Minister Ng has mentioned, we have recovered the jobs that were lost during the pandemic, and we have exceeded those numbers. We have now record low unemployment in this country. And although there is uncertainty, not just in Canada, but all around the world with respect to inflation and the increasing cost of borrowing, we will continue to be there as a government because our measures and our programs are targeted to support Canadians that need the most help, whether it's students, whether it's seniors, whether it's supporting families with children. We will continue to support Canadians to ensure that they are supported, and we will continue to have their backs. So I will turn it back to the media. We did stop at 5 speakers, so we will continue now. Please remember to introduce yourself and your organization.
I'm from Army TV. We understand that federal government has announced quite a few policies to address the difficulties of people facing. For example, the $10 childcare plan you mentioned a few times, but we also know actually some policies depend on the provincial government to implement. So, for example, Ontario was the last one to sign the deals with the federal government. I just want to know, how do you work with the provincial government to facilitate those policies? We all know right now, actually, the procedure is quite slow, and people wondering when they could really see the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Dawn Shao. I'm representing the Hutio Media. We run a WeChat news account called 多多时间传播news. So I guess my question sounds a little bit selfish compared to others because it's kind of related to me and my media colleagues. We realized there is a heritage fund in the CRA. After a very tedious process last year, we realized we are not eligible because a lot of the work is not called original content because we do translation of the mainstream information which is impactful and meaningful to the Chinese community. However, we will not be able to get government support on that end. So as an entrepreneur myself, I would like to know how the government can help, I guess, media, like the media outlets here, like mine. So yeah, that's my question.
Thank you.
So I have a question. My name is Grant Guo from FM 1059, the Chinese radio network. My question is that there will be a delegation formed by the MPs, including the Liberal MP, to visit Taiwan. And that will upset the Chinese government. A lot of Chinese people, especially in the Mandarin community, are very concerned about that. I would want to know the reaction from you guys.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Any more questions?
Let's do this.
Okay, Minister Ng.
Okay. The first question, which is how we work with the provinces to get things done for Canadians. And it's historic that we have signed childcare agreements to deliver $10 a day childcare all across all the provinces and territories. And you're absolutely right. I think what we have shown, what the federal government has shown throughout the pandemic, is that we are prepared to work, and we will always be prepared to work when it comes to delivering for Canadians and for Canadian families. Childcare is no different. I know that my colleague in Minister Gould and certainly Minister Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, has done a lot of work to make sure that that the investments are made. I want to assure Canadian families and those here in Ontario and indeed across the country that the federal government is working very, very hard, while at the same time respecting the provinces and other jurisdictions to do the work that they are doing. But this is an important priority, and I think Canadians' voices matter, and I think that we all have one constituent, that's you, and that are Canadian families. So we're going to keep doing that work from our standpoint, and you've seen us do that time and time again throughout the pandemic, and this is no different. With respect to media, I hope what you are seeing here today is our absolute commitment to media, in particular media outlets like yours that are the channel of communication to so many people in our communities who only read and listen in our language, and the respect for the free press and the supports that are needed is something that is really important to our government. Of course, as we deliver out these programs, issues will arise, and this is where it's really important that we are having this exchange with you, the Chinese media, the ethnic media, so that we are able to work through these issues in such a way that ultimately, what is really important, that we are able to have factual news, accurate news, accurate information delivered by the very important role that all of you play as media, and certainly given the wonderful diversity that is Canada, that our ethnic media have an opportunity to do what they do, which is so important to the democracy of Canada. And then finally, on the question that Grant, you asked about parliamentarians and what they are, sort of discussing or contemplating, about travels. Parliamentarians make those decisions on their own and independent of government decisions. And maybe on this one, I'm going to turn it to my colleague, who's the parliamentary secretary for the foreign minister, to respond to that. But parliamentarians make decisions on their own, and we respect that.
Thanks, Mary. And I would just add a couple of things. Yes, indeed, parliamentary committees and associations make their own decisions. But I would say two things with that. Canada has a profound and important relationship with China, and we will continue to keep that important relationship with China. We have people-to-people ties, we have business-to-business ties, we have foreign policy reactions and interactions that are very important for us to continue with the People's Republic of China. We also have very important people-to-people and business-to-business ties with Taiwan. Within the one China policy, which there's been absolutely no change to, we will continue to foster those relationships with Taiwan. And a parliamentary delegation should be no pretext for any aggression towards Taiwan or anyone else. The reality is it's very important for us to calm down any tensions that are in those straits. That we think that right now there's a way of working. Our world has found a way to honor Taiwan and its important business role and its important cultural role. We will continue to look for ways for Taiwan to engage in multilateral fora around the world, and Canada will do that. We're doing it within the One China policy. We recognize China as an important sovereign nation, and we will continue to do that. We will continue, as I've said to this group before, we will continue to compete with China and make sure we have a level playing field. That's what our Minister of Trade is always doing, looking for openings on trade. We will continue to collaborate and cooperate with China on areas where we have mutual concern, like climate change and very important global issues. We'll challenge China as well on human rights issues, and we'll not be afraid to do that because that's what Canadians want. And at times, we'll coexist. We'll allow an understanding that we have two different ways of looking at the world, maybe more than two. In Canada, we have 25 different ways of looking at the world, and in China, there are different ways of looking at the world. We have different worldviews. We'll respect that and simply coexist. So right now, calm down the tensions. There's no need for aggression, and we'll try to make sure that our world exists in harmony, and that's the Canadian way.
A follow-up question. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because according to some news sources, say that this trip, the future trip, will be subsidized or paid by the Taiwanese government. Is that true? And it says common practice that the Canadian delegation go to overseas and then subsidized or paid by the foreign government?
And let me tell you, there are different ways that parliamentarians travel. What is being talked about right now is a parliamentary trip by the International Trade Committee, which you will pay for, thank you. The Canadian taxpayer will pay for travel, and it's important travel for parliamentarians to travel around the world to see different ways of doing things. So if it's a parliamentary delegation from a committee of the House of Commons, it has to have unanimous consent from the House of Commons, it has to be approved by the committee, and then it will happen, but it will not be paid for by Taiwan.
Does anybody else want to comment on anything before?
I just want to support what Ms. Ng was saying. I just want to point out a fact. It's not. I know there's a lot of attention being paid to reports about this trip, but it's not in reaction of any recent events. It's a common practice by Canadian Parliament. There are many Canadian parliamentarians that have traveled to Taiwan previously, whether it's the friendship group, whether it's the committees. These are all routine work that they saw important, and it is a choice of parliamentarians from all parties, not just from the Liberal Party and the committee. You know, we're not the majority on the committee; we actually are the minority on the committee. So I just want to have that back.
Go ahead.
Sorry, unrelated to that, sorry for jumping back, but for the sake of Chinese media roundtable, is there anything you would like to address specifically to Chinese Canadians on regarding the milestone for the specifically for Chinese Canadians, the milestone of the budget?
Yes, I mean,
just for the sake.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think that probably I'll just go back to where I started in the opening remarks. The budget is, the budget is made some important investments and decisions to help with affordability for all Canadians and Chinese Canadians. Lots of Chinese Canadians are in small businesses and who are entrepreneurs, and the supports that are there are going to benefit them. I know for Chinese Canadians, the issue of public safety and safety in our community, and that for young people and for elders in our community. It is extremely important. So following through, I mean, we were given a mandate to follow through on on public safety. So the handgun ban that we said we would do it's in effect. and that is going to make our community safer. I mean, in fact, if our colleague from Market Unionville, Paul, was here, he would have spoken to that because it's important to our community. Standing up for each other in this community, Chinese Canadians in particular, in tackling racism in all of its forms, including anti-Asian racism, has been something that every single person here on this panel, including the Prime Minister, has been absolutely steadfast at doing. So I think that that the issues that I certainly hear from Chinese Canadians are, how do we have a better life here in Canada? Is it going to be affordable? Do we live in a place where diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice, and that we will stick up for each other, and we will, and that it is safe, and that we are living in safe and prosperous communities, and that our children and our grandchildren, have a planet that they will thrive in, which means tackling climate change. But in tackling climate change, by the way, we will create the green jobs of the future, which is what Leah talked about. These are the things that we hear from the Chinese community and from in each of our communities. So I think simply put, you elected us to do a job. You are seeing you are seeing us take action in our budget in a whole range of measures, and we're going to keep doing that work, and we're going to keep doing these kinds of dialogues, particularly with the Chinese media, so that we can communicate very directly through you and the important work that you do as the media, talking to Chinese Canadians and Asian Canadians.
Just add one thing. Even though we're not from Heritage here today, I just want to acknowledge that we will take back what you said. This government is committed to community cultural media. We are committed to finding ways for new media because our old structures don't always fit our funding programs, and things change, and government's slow. Government is slow. But I just want to acknowledge that. It's an important fact, and I'm happy to...
Except my department.
Oh, this department. You wouldn't believe trade. I get a readout every 6 seconds. Minister Ng has spoken to Minister. Minister Ng has spoken. You wouldn't believe it. Like that. Heritage is slower, but careful. So we will take that back, and happy to get more information, because there's always problems in funding and reality. And you're suggesting a reality that maybe has been missed. We'll take it back.
Okay. I got Leah, and I'm going to...
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad, Rob, you mentioned that. I was going to say the same thing. I think, news is about reaching people. And if translation services are an important part of that in Canada, obviously. So I'm sure that the Minister of Heritage will be interested in hearing feedback, so thank you.
And we do a lot of original content, but they think it's not enough.
Yes,
I understand. There's a lot of proof. But
yeah, no, I know, we do, and it's wonderful, thank you. And also, I just wanted to comment on childcare. I don't remember the report from Ami or Ming, but to talk a little bit about that, because childcare is an incredibly important program for all Canadians. Chinese Canadians, you're asking about messages. I think childcare and enabling parents to work if they want to be able to participate in the workforce, both parents, is very important. And I think that our Minister did an amazing job negotiating these agreements with each of the provinces. And a lot of what was done was in that negotiation phase, the federal government's role. So it was very detailed, spelled out in terms of what it was to obtain, what the parameters were, etc. But we do respect the federal system, provincial jurisdiction, and so we rely on our provincial partners to then execute. However, knowing Minister Gould, I'm sure she will be in conversation when things aren't moving quickly, and that we will be trying to do our part without overstepping provincial boundaries to make sure it happens, because for many of the constituents in my riding, Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, it's very important, and I know for many Canadians with young families, it will make a huge difference.
Thank you, Leah, and Han.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add something to the engagement stuff. You asked about milestone. Actually, one very significant milestone was set during the pandemic. The Liberal government actually went back and opened up the anti-racism strategy in 2019. Add the phrase anti-Asian racism to it. That's why you have been seeing in news releases and recent budget, that phrase is in the budget. So as a result of that, and with the work of ministry and many of my colleagues, there was over $11 million given to the race relations companies, and a significant portion of that went to address anti-Asian racism. And in the most recent budget, that $11 million has increased. I think it was over $85 million. But I got to go back and check the figure. But it did go up significantly, which means that there's a lot more resource now for agencies across the country to address anti-Asian racism.
And Han is our chair of the Chinese caucus. So there you go, folks. I would like to thank all of you on behalf of our entire team here for Joseph, I apologize. And I'll tell you why. There's food there, and we only have the room until 11. So we want to give you the last few minutes to enjoy some. But if some of us might be around, feel free to come and speak to us. Thank you all for being here, and we'll be happy to mingle. Thank you, everyone.